we're launching a new special series about Canadians from coast to coast calling out discrimination. And we're not just talking about it, we're tackling the issues head on, finding new ways to make a difference. Your Marketplace starts now. 2020, a year like no other. From the global pandemic,
a dramatic spike in coronavirus cases,
a rallying cry across the United States, Canada, and much of the world,
to the reckoning on race.
Nobody should be murdered just by the color of their own skin.
People are standing up and speaking out about discrimination, privilege, power. In this special Marketplace series, we're going to face racism on the job, shining a light on different industries, finding Canadians who are pushing for change. Meet Shane McQueen and Gary Similian.
My man, what's going on?
They work in Fort McMurray, Alberta, the oil sands capital. Did you guys feel like you were treated differently?
Oh, in my case, big time. So definitely you feel like you're being targeted. They'll try to push a button. Basically, they want you to quit, you know? They'll do anything in their power to want you to quit in a sleek way, you know?
Singled out, they say, because of the color of their skin.
This is a career that I'm trying to move forward in, and, you know, something that I want to do for my life. And to not be afforded the same opportunities as everybody else is hard.
Shane's been working in the oil sands for 14 years and doesn't see a lot of black men on site. In fact, visible minorities only represent 13% of oil and gas workers, compared to 21% across all industries. He says he's a moving target for mistreatment and, early on in his career, racist jokes.
So there's a group of white people and me, and this one guy's making a bunch of black jokes and putting me in them. I remember one was like something, Shane jumping on the bed, and then, you know, my hair getting stuck in the stucco ceiling.
But Shane doesn't report it. He doesn't want to jeopardize his new job at North American Construction Group. North American says it can't respond because the issue went unreported and happened years ago.
At that time, I was like the only person of color out there at all, like, you know? So I felt so small and like I couldn't really do anything.
Gary can relate. He recalls a recent experience with a former co-worker at the company Badger Daylighting.
So many times he said to me, man, Gary, I can basically slap the black out of you. Like in front of people, you know what I mean? In front of people, in front of other guys around, you know, but just on a jokingly way. But this is not something that you say in a jokingly way. That's not something that you say to another human being, period.
Badger says their code of conduct prohibits them from commenting on what happened, and Gary didn't report the issue. He says he complained before about discrimination in a previous job at KMC Mining, where a supervisor kept picking on him.
I said, man, you're big time racist, and this is not fair. And at this time, I'm not gonna take it anymore.
What happened when you filed the report?
Nothing. You know, you were thinking with all the proof, with all the documentation, with all the witness, you know, when you bring it to HR and when you bring it to the union, you think that they will do something about it, you know?
KMC Mining says a third party investigated his complaint and determined it was unfounded. Gary agreed to a layoff.
They'd rather hire like a third party for someone else to try to dispute it. So they're always gonna find a way because they're always gonna protect the supervisors instead of you in the first place.
Shane and Gary are not alone. Have you ever faced racism on the job?
Definitely, yes. The first one's university when I was a waitress at an Italian restaurant. The manager was like, wow, you speak really well and articulate, you know? He's like, you must have not grown up here. Where did you grow up? And I was like, in Canada. And he's like, well, you're very different from African Americans. They don't speak well, you know, they're lazy.
Especially during COVID-19, when the outbreak first came out, every time I was in the elevator or getting a cup of coffee, somebody would turn around, cover their face, and then look at me and cough.
Well, maybe I'm not smiling at the moment, and automatically I'm being told I should smile more. I'm scaring off customers. And I don't understand why, because of my big stature or the color of my skin. I'm checked on more. than other staff.
Yeah, I've experienced some forms of racism, mostly microaggressions. People might comment on my hair, or, you know, it's expected for me to work harder, being a black male.
This professor has heard it all.
Across the board, you just don't complain about things. You're supposed to suck it up.
Sarah Doro has spent more than a decade researching and interviewing workers in the oil sands.
Because every workplace, of course, right? You know, there's both systemic racism and daily sort of racial discrimination and harassment. But what does it look like there, right? And so it takes multiple forms given that culture and that context.
For Shane, that means the loss of a good-paying permanent position back in 2011.
Got this from CNRO. I brought it because it was during a time when my mom had cancer. I had to wake up like 3 in the morning, catch her bus for like 4 super long days. Okay. So I was tired. On breaks, I'd fall asleep. They would, every time they would come and get me, go for a piss test.
And so you were basically singled out, you're thinking?
I think I was singled out because other employees told me that they would fall asleep and they would just go and wake them up and let them get back to work. And they never did that for me ever once.
CNRL, or Canadian Natural Resources Limited, won't comment on Shane's experience. But he's been on contract ever since he lost that job. Professor Doro says it's a harsh reality for many workers of color.
You're knocking on that door. You have to work harder to prove yourself. We heard this from many of our participants. Even if you sort of do get in, you might hit that ceiling, right? That given the old boys network culture there, and it isn't to a great degree an old white boys network, that actually being able to move up is also more difficult.
We hear story after story from racialized workers.
They're reluctant to hire if they don't see a Michael on the resume. The mine manager said I should change my name.
For simply doing my job and not putting up with abusive behavior, I was punished, demoted.
The color of my skin excluded me from OT shifts, advancement within the company.
I continue setting in my resume. There's been sites that I worked at. I know I did a great job. I've had supervisors tell me that I've done a great job. And it's in those situations where I wouldn't even get an interview, and then other people are bypassing me over and over and over, and it just gets tiring.
A permanent position means stability and more money, but Shane's been struggling to land something better. How many rejection letters have you received through the years?
Like literally, probably about 40, 50. They have a spot like when you're applying where it says check off if you are a minority. I sometimes feel like they use that to not hire you.
Most of the companies we spoke to deny that racism is a part of their culture. In fact, KMC Mining lists a number of initiatives they say uphold their strong values, including an orphanage in Africa. Gary's left the industry now.
My experience was totally negative. You know, from the first company that I worked for, then the second company.
But Shane wants to stay. What do you hope will happen by going public, sharing your story?
At one point, they noticed that there weren't enough women on sites. So they created a program called Women Building Futures. I think it'd be nice if they created a program like Minorities Building Futures to help diversify the workplace.
Which brings us to this moment.
So great to see you. Come on in.
This is the headquarters of Women Building Futures in downtown Edmonton. It's helped women break into the trades for more than 2 decades.
Welcome.
Jess Thompson is on the executive team.
We're excited you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Both sit down and remove their masks.
We always see women coming through the work site. So my goal is to try to see the same type of thing for minorities.
I think that there's a lot of work that can be done there, and having someone like yourself champion that work and partner with community organizations to do it is a wonderful thing.
But do you help them, like, what if they feel like they're feeling discrimination?
So we encourage the women to call us, but we also work really closely with our employers in situations like that.
So that's good, so they don't feel like they're on their own, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And we encourage employers too to build a culture of mentorship, and we really hope, instead of hiring 1 or 2 women, when you hire in cohorts, there comes that informal mentorship, and they start to support each other as well.
Because at first I was just doing this to just kind of bring awareness to it, but now it kind of seems like it's kind of moving forward where it could actually be something, right?
And what we have here, it works. It works well for women, and I'm absolutely sure there's elements of that could support the mission that you're moving forward for sure.
Are you able to help with that, those connections?
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing this here. It's
I appreciate you so much.
Shane's ready for this new challenge.
Oh, if something like this was available for me, this would absolutely make a difference for me. Probably be knocking on some doors to see if we could get some support.
He's hopeful for the future. We'll continue to follow his journey. And we're looking to hear from more Canadians who face racism. Reach out to us, marketplace@cbc.ca.